The December wind cut through my thin uniform like a blade as I hurried across the piazza toward the Belvedere, balancing a tray of champagne flutes I'd picked up from the overflow tent. My fingers had gone numb an hour ago, but I kept moving because standing still meant thinking about the hospital bill sitting on my grandmother's kitchen table, and thinking about that bill meant drowning. Inside, the warmth hit me like a wall. Crystal chandeliers threw diamonds of light across marble floors, and women in gowns that cost more than my annual rent laughed behind their hands. I was invisible here, just another black vest weaving through the crowd with drinks nobody would remember receiving. I'd almost made it back to the service station when I noticed him. He stood near the terrace doors, perfectly still while everyone else performed their wealth. His suit was dark gray, cut so precisely it looked like architecture, and he wasn't drinking, wasn't eating, wasn't pretending to enjoy himself. He was watching, not the room, me. When our eyes met across 20 feet of imported tile, something cold slid down my spine that had nothing to do with the winter I'd just escaped. I dropped my gaze and kept moving, but I felt his attention follow me like heat. The service corridor smelled like lemon polish in desperation. I was refilling my tray when my phone buzzed in my apron pocket, the hospice number. My hands shook as I answered, and the words came in my grandmother's language, the one I never spoke at work because it marked me as foreign, as other, as poor. "She's asking for you," the nurse said gently. "Her breathing changed an hour ago." I pressed my palm against the steel counter and forced air into my lungs. "I'm working until midnight. I can't. I don't have cab fare and the buses." "Chiara," the nurse's voice softened, "come when you can." I hung up and stared at the phone, doing math that wouldn't balance no matter how I arranged it. Rent was due. The pharmacy needed payment. My grandmother needed me, and I was trapped in this beautiful prison serving champagne to people who wouldn't notice if I disappeared. "You speak Calabrese." I spun. He stood in the service corridor doorway, filling the frame like a promise or a threat. Up close, he was older than I'd thought, maybe 40, with silver threading his dark hair and lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled, though he wasn't smiling now. Sir, guests aren't supposed to be back here." My English came out steady despite my racing heart. "I'm not a guest." He stepped inside and the door whispered shut behind him. "I own this building, and 4 others on this block." Of course he did. Men like him owned everything. "Your grandmother is in Santa Lucia Hospice." It wasn't a question. "The bills are 14 months overdue." Ice flooded my veins. "How do you?" "I make it my business to know things." He moved closer, and I caught the scent of his cologne, cedar, and something darker, more expensive, especially about people who interest me. "I don't interest you." I meant it to sound firm, but it came out like a question. His mouth curved almost. "You've worked here 6 months. Never late, never sick, never stolen. You speak 4 languages fluently, which is 3 more than anyone else carrying trays tonight. And when you thought no one could hear, you switched to a dialect most people under 50 have forgotten." He paused. "You interest me very much, Chiara." Hearing my name in his voice felt like a door opening that I hadn't known was locked. "What do you want?" I whispered. He reached into his jacket and produced a business card, heavy stock, minimal text. "I need a translator for business dealings in the South. 3 months. You'd travel, attend meetings, handle documents." He set the card on the counter between us. "The salary is in euros, and it starts with clearing your grandmother's debt." I stared at the number written in fountain pen at the bottom. It had too many zeros. "What kind of business?" Because men who owned buildings and knew hospital records and appeared in service corridors with job offers weren't in any business I wanted to understand. "The kind that requires discretion." His dark eyes held mine. "And trust." "I don't trust you." "Good." He adjusted his cuff, revealing a watch that probably cost more than my life. "Trust would be foolish. But you need what I'm offering, and I need someone smart enough to be afraid. We can work with that." My phone buzzed again. Another text from the hospice. My grandmother was slipping away while I stood here bargaining with a man whose name I didn't even know. "There's a car outside the service entrance," he said quietly. "Black sedan, driver named Paulo. He'll take you to Santa Lucia and wait as long as you need. Tomorrow, if you want the position, come to this address." He tapped the card. "If you don't, the ride is a gift. No obligation." He turned to leave, then paused at the door. "My name is Dante Marcello." His voice carried the weight of something I didn't yet understand. "And for what it's worth, your grandmother raised someone extraordinary. Don't let this place make you forget that." Then he was gone, and I was alone with a business card that felt like a beautiful chain. The sedan was exactly where he'd said it would be, idling in the alley with the kind of shine that suggested bulletproof glass. Paulo, silver-haired and professionally neutral, opened the door without questions. The interior smelled like leather and privilege. "Santa Lucia Hospice," I said, and hated how my voice shook. "Already programmed, miss." Paulo's eyes met mine in the rearview mirror. "Mr. Marcello called ahead. They're expecting you." Of course he had. Men like Dante Marcello didn't make offers. They arranged realities and waited for you to step into them. The hospice hallway was too quiet, punctuated by the rhythmic beep of machines and the shuffle of night nurses. My grandmother looked smaller than she had that morning, her hand translucent against the white sheets. But when I took it, her grip was still strong. "Chiara," her voice was paper-thin, "you smell like rich people's wine." I laughed because the alternative was crying. "I brought the party to you, Nana." Her eyes, still sharp despite the morphine, studied my face. "Something happened tonight." I told her about Dante Marcello, about the offer, about the number that could erase our debt and buy her comfort in whatever time remained. I expected her to tell me to run, to stay away from men who owned buildings and appeared in service corridors. Instead, she smiled. "Marcello," she repeated, and something flickered in her expression, recognition or memory or perhaps simple coincidence. "That's an old name, a serious name." "You know it." I knew a Marcello once, many years ago. Her thumb traced circles on my palm the way she had when I was small. "Before your grandfather died, before we came north." She closed her eyes, and for a moment I thought she'd fallen asleep. Then, "If this Marcello offers protection, take it. But remember, Tesoro, all protection has a price. Make sure you understand what it costs before you agree to pay." The nurse appeared in the doorway, gentle but firm about visiting hours. I kissed my grandmother's forehead and promised to return in the morning, though we both knew morning might be too late. Paulo drove me home through empty streets, and when we arrived at my building, 4 floors of peeling paint and broken mailboxes, he handed me an envelope. "From Mr. Marcello, he said you'd need breakfast." Inside were €500 and a note in precise handwriting. "The choice is always yours." I stood on the frozen sidewalk, clutching an envelope that felt like possibility wrapped in danger, and realized I'd already decided. The address on Dante's card led to a building in the financial district, all glass and steel with a lobby that echoed. The receptionist, impeccably dressed and utterly disinterested in my second-hand coat, made a call and nodded toward the elevator. "Penthouse, he's expecting you." The elevator rose so smoothly I barely felt it move. When the doors opened, I stepped directly into an office that was more window than room, offering a view of the city that made me dizzy. Dante stood at the glass, hands in his pockets, watching dawn paint the rooftops gold. "Your grandmother?" he asked without turning. "Still here." I set my bag down carefully. "For now." He turned then, and in the morning light I saw what the Belvedere's chandeliers had hidden: a scar along his jaw, faint but deliberate, and eyes that had seen things I hoped I'd never witness. "Paulo said you took the envelope but didn't use it." "I'm not a charity case." No, he moved toward his desk where a folder waited. You're an investment, there's a difference. He opened the folder and spread photographs across the mahogany, men in expensive suits at outdoor cafes, documents with official seals, warehouse exteriors. I facilitate transactions between parties who don't trust each other. Sometimes that requires translation. More often it requires reading what isn't said. He tapped one photo. This man runs shipping through Palermo. He speaks Italian but negotiates in dialect. He'll say one thing to my face and another to his associates. I need to know both conversations. I studied the photographs, my stomach tightening. You're asking me to spy. I'm asking you to listen. Dante's voice remained level. And to tell me the truth. In return, I clear your grandmother's debt today. I arrange for her transfer to the private wing, actual hospice care, not the warehouse they're using now. And I pay you enough to quit serving champagne to people who will never see you. He slid a contract across the desk, and I forced myself to read it despite the way my hands wanted to shake. 3 months. Translator and assistant. Accommodation provided. Compensation that would change my life. What's the catch? You belong to my organization until the contract ends. He said it without inflection. You don't discuss our business with anyone. You don't freelance information. You don't disappear without notice. If you violate confidentiality, there are consequences. What kind of consequences? His expression didn't change, the kind neither of us wants to discover. My phone buzzed, the hospice again. My grandmother was asking for me, and I was standing in a tower office negotiating with a man whose business required discretion and trust and secrecy, weighing my soul against her comfort. I want it in writing, I heard myself say, that my grandmother receives care regardless of what happens to me. If I fail, if I quit, if something goes wrong, she's protected. Dante's eyes flickered with something that might have been respect. He picked up a fountain pen and added a clause in swift, precise script, then signed it. Anything else? I want to know what I'm really signing up for. I met his gaze and held it. Not the legal words, the truth. He set down the pen and circled the desk, stopping close enough that I had to tilt my head to maintain eye contact. The truth is that I operate in spaces where law and commerce blur. I move money, goods, influence. Some of it's legitimate. Most of it exists in gray areas that people like you prefer not to think about. I have enemies who would use anyone close to me as leverage, which means if you take this position, you become a target. He paused. I also have resources those enemies can't match, and I protect what's mine. Sign this contract and you're mine to protect. But protection isn't freedom, Chiara. It's a different kind of cage. The city glittered behind him, beautiful and pitiless. How do I know you'll keep your promises? I whispered. You don't. He pulled out his phone and made a call, speaking Italian too rapid for me to follow. Then he turned the screen toward me. But the transfer has already started. The screen showed a payment confirmation. My grandmother's entire debt, cleared. A reservation at Santa Lucia's private wing, starting immediately. A consultation with Dr. Werner, a Swiss specialist in palliative care whose name I'd seen in medical journals. He'd done it before I signed, before I agreed, before I'd even walked through his door. Why? My voice cracked. Because your grandmother is dying and you shouldn't have to choose between her dignity and your safety. He pocketed the phone. The contract is for my protection, not yours. Sign it or don't. She's taken care of either way. I picked up the pen with fingers that no longer felt like mine, and signed my name in ink that smelled like cedar and choices I couldn't take back. Dante collected the contract and locked it in his desk. Paulo will take you to collect your things. You'll stay in one of my properties, a smaller building, secure, closer to the hospice. Your grandmother will be moved this afternoon. He handed me a phone, sleek, expensive, the kind that probably couldn't be traced. This is how you reach me. There are 3 numbers programmed, mine, Paulo's, and my assistant Sophia. Use them. When do I start? You already have. He walked me to the elevator, his hand finding the small of my back in a gesture that felt protective and possessive all at once. We leave for Naples tomorrow morning. 6 a.m. Pack light. Anything you need will be provided. The elevator doors opened, and I stepped inside, still holding the phone that proved I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross. Chiara, Dante's voice stopped me as the doors began to close. Welcome to my world. Try not to get lost in it. The apartment Paulo delivered me to wasn't small by any reasonable standard. 3 rooms with actual heat and windows that closed properly, and a kitchen where things worked. My landlord's number went to voicemail when I called to break my lease, but it didn't matter. I'd paid through the end of the month, and I didn't own anything worth moving except books and my grandmother's photograph. Sophia, Dante's assistant, arrived an hour later with paperwork and instructions delivered in brisk, unaccented English. She was 40, elegant, and utterly unimpressed by my questions. Mr. Marcello's expectations are simple, she said, spreading documents across the counter. Be punctual, be honest, be invisible when necessary and memorable when useful. She handed me a credit card. For expenses. He tracks spending but doesn't micromanage. Don't test his patience with designer shoes and we'll get along fine. What happens if I disappoint him? I asked. Sophia's smile was thin. No one disappoints Mr. Marcello twice. Now these documents detail your travel itinerary, accommodation protocols, and security procedures. Read them tonight. Questions get asked once, so make them count. She left before I could ask what happened to the person before me. If there'd been a person before me. If I was filling a space, someone else had vacated voluntarily. I went to the hospice at sunset and found my grandmother in a room that looked nothing like the warehouse ward where I'd left her. Real curtains, a chair for visitors, medical equipment that beeped with confidence. She was sleeping, her breathing easier than it had been in weeks, and when the nurse checked her chart, she smiled. Dr. Werner saw her this afternoon, adjusted her medications. She'll be more comfortable now. I sat beside the bed and took my grandmother's hand, feeling the weight of what I'd traded settling over me like snow. She woke as the light faded, her eyes finding mine immediately. You signed it. How did you know? I can see it on your face. She squeezed my hand. Tell me about him. So I did, about Dante's office and his scar, and the way he'd cleared her debt before I'd agreed to anything. About the contract and the phone and the apartment I didn't deserve. He sounds like his father, she murmured, and my breath caught. You really knew them. A lifetime ago. Her gaze drifted toward the window. Your grandfather worked for the old Marcello Logistics, they called it. Moving things that needed moving, people who needed moving, she laughed softly. I hated it, but the old man, he was fair. When your grandfather died in an accident that wasn't an accident, Marcello made sure I got north safely, made sure I had money to start over. He didn't have to do that. Did he expect something in return? Protection always expects something, but he never collected. She turned back to me, suddenly urgent. The son, Dante, if he's anything like his father, he'll keep you safe as long as you're useful. But don't mistake his protection for affection, Tesoro. These men don't love, they possess. I stayed until she fell asleep again, then walked back through streets that felt different now, like I was seeing them through bulletproof glass, insulated and separate. At midnight, the phone Dante gave me lit up with a single message. Sleep well. Tomorrow changes everything. I didn't sleep well. I lay in the dark of an apartment I hadn't earned, thinking about chains that looked like gifts and doors I'd walked through without checking if they locked behind me. At 5:30, Paulo knocked. I'd packed a single bag like Sophia instructed, though I had no idea what one wore to meetings in Naples with men who operated in gray areas. The car ride to the private airfield was silent. Dawn broke over the city in shades of pearl and smoke, beautiful and indifferent. Dante waited beside a jet that was smaller than I'd imagined but no less intimidating, talking on a phone in what sounded like German. He ended the call when he saw me and nodded approval at my bag. You follow instructions. That's promising. Inside, the jet was all leather and dark wood, designed for business, not comfort. Dante settled into a seat that probably cost more than my education and opened a laptop without ceremony. Sit, he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. We have 40 minutes before landing. I need you focused. He walked me through the Naples meeting, who would be there, what they claimed to want, what they actually wanted. A shipping magnate with political connections, a banker who'd survived 3 scandals, a woman who owned half the port and pretended she didn't. Your job is to listen, Dante said. They'll be polite to your face and vicious behind your back. I need to know what's said in both conversations. What if they know I'm listening? They will, but they'll assume you're just a translator, too insignificant to matter. His eyes lifted from the screen. Use that. People tell the truth around furniture. The flight was smooth and claustrophobic. Dante worked without pause, reading documents in 3 languages and making notes in margins. Once, turbulence made me grab the armrest, and he glanced up with something that might have been concern. Afraid of flying. Afraid of falling, I corrected, and his mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. We landed in rain. A different car, a different driver, but the same sense of being moved through a world where everything had been arranged in advance. The hotel was elegant and anonymous, the kind of place that asked no questions about who came and went. My room connected to Dante's suite through a door that locked from my side but probably not from his. I unpacked my single bag and changed into the one professional outfit I owned, a black dress that Sophia had looked at with pity and approval. The meeting was in a restaurant closed to the public, all white tablecloths and candles that threw dancing shadows. The shipping magnate, Marco Santini, kissed my hand and made a joke about Dante bringing entertainment. The banker ignored me entirely. The woman, Lucia Bianchi, assessed me with eyes that missed nothing. Your translator is very young, she observed in Italian. My translator is very good, Dante replied in the same language, then switched to English. Shall we begin? The men talked business, shipping routes and customs protocols and percentages that meant nothing to me. But when Marco thought I was distracted by pouring water, he murmured to the banker in Neapolitan, Marcello's getting soft, bringing a pretty face to intimidate us. I kept my expression neutral and poured wine I wouldn't drink. Under the table, I felt Dante's foot tap mine once. He'd heard it too. The real negotiation happened in looks and pauses, in what wasn't said. Lucia watched Dante like a cat watching a rival, waiting for weakness. When dessert arrived, she switched to dialect and told Marco that Dante's position in Rome was fragile, someone should test it. I translated the menu instead and caught Dante's fractional nod. He'd heard. He always heard. After in the car, he was silent for 3 blocks. Then, you have good instincts. They think you're vulnerable. They always think that. He pulled out his phone and typed rapidly. Let them think it until it costs them. Back at the hotel, he walked me to my room and paused at the threshold. This close, I could see the silver in his eyes, the way his jaw tensed when he was thinking. You did well tonight, he said quietly. Most people freeze the first time they realize they're in a room full of predators. Maybe I froze, and you just didn't notice. I notice everything about you, Chiara. The way he said it made it sound like a warning. Get some rest. Tomorrow's more of the same, but with politicians. They're worse. He turned to leave, then stopped. The door between our rooms locks. Use it if it helps you sleep. But know that if something goes wrong, that lock won't keep me out. It should have terrified me. Instead, I felt safe. I locked the door anyway. We stayed in Naples 3 days, a blur of meetings and restaurants and conversations in languages that slipped between registers like water. I learned to read the room, who held real power, who was posturing, who would betray whom the moment the price was right. Dante taught me without teaching, his silence more instructive than words. When Marco tried to renegotiate terms, Dante simply stood and walked to the window, forcing everyone to wait. When the banker implied that Dante's Roman connections were weakening, Dante smiled and said, "You should call them yourself. They'd love to hear from you." The banker didn't call. On our last night, Lucia invited us to her villa overlooking the bay. It was beautiful and cold, full of art that looked like assets waiting to be liquidated. She served wine I didn't recognize and talked about shipping routes like they were chess moves. "You've trained her well," Lucia said to Dante, nodding toward me. "She doesn't react when we test her." "I don't train people." Dante's voice carried an edge. "I hire the intelligent ones and let them prove themselves." Lucia laughed. "Dangerous, giving them that much autonomy. What if she decides you're not worth her loyalty?" "Then I'll have misjudged her." He met my eyes across the room. "I rarely misjudge." We left at midnight, and Paulo drove us back through rain that made the city lights blur like watercolors. In the car, Dante was quiet, scrolling through messages with attention I hadn't seen before. "Problem?" I asked. "Always." He pocketed the phone. "Someone's asking questions about you in Rome, about your grandmother, about who you are to me." I spread through my chest. "Who?" "If I knew that, it wouldn't be a problem." He turned to face me fully. "I'm moving you both tomorrow. My people will handle it, but you need to trust me." "You keep saying that, trust you. You haven't given me much reason to." His jaw tightened. "I cleared your grandmother's debt. I gave you a position that pays more than most people earn in a year. I've protected you in rooms where someone else would have thrown you to the sharks for entertainment." He leaned closer. "What more do you need?" Honesty. The word came out sharper than I intended. About what I signed up for, about what you really do, about why someone's asking questions and why it matters. For a long moment he didn't answer. Then, "You want honesty? Fine. I run an organization my father built from smuggling routes and protection rackets. We've gone mostly legitimate real estate, shipping, consulting, but we still move things that sit between legal and illegal. Money from banks that don't ask questions. Information for buyers who can't be connected to the source. Occasionally, people who need to disappear or reappear." He paused. "I've never pretended to be a saint, Chiara. But I keep my promises, which is more than most men in my position can claim." "And the person asking questions?" "Probably Lucia, maybe Marco, possibly someone else who thinks you're leverage against me." His hand found mine in the darkness, his grip firm. "Which is why I'm moving you. I don't let my enemies dictate terms, and I don't leave my people exposed." "I'm not yours," I whispered, but we both knew it was a lie. His thumb traced my palm. "Tell yourself that if it helps you sleep." The car stopped at the hotel, and he walked me to my room like we were normal people finishing a normal evening. At my door, he hesitated. "Pack your personal things tonight. Everything else will be replaced. We leave at dawn." "Where are we going?" "Somewhere they can't reach you." He touched my cheek, barely a brush of his fingers. "Somewhere I can keep you safe." Then he was gone, and I was alone with a suitcase I didn't want to fill and choices I'd already made. The flight to Rome should have felt like retreat, but Dante treated it like advanced planning. Sophia met us at the airfield with a tablet full of logistics, new accommodations, security protocols, a schedule of specialists for my grandmother. "The villa is in Trastevere," Sophia explained. "High walls, limited access, monitored approaches. She'll be comfortable." She glanced at me. "You'll have a suite on the second floor, separate from Mr. Marcello's quarters but close enough for security." "How close is close enough?" I asked. Sophia's expression didn't change. "Close enough that he can reach you if there's a problem, not close enough to cause inappropriate speculation." Dante, reviewing documents across the cabin, didn't look up. "Sophia manages my reputation. I manage my reality. You'll find the distinction clarifying." The villa was more fortress than home, 15-foot walls, cameras on every corner, gates that closed with the weight of finality. But inside it was beautiful. Terracotta floors and frescoed ceilings, windows that caught afternoon light and held it. My grandmother would have a room on the ground floor with a garden view. I would have autonomy within careful limits. I found Dante in what Sophia called his study, a room lined with books I suspected he'd actually read. He was on the phone, speaking rapid German, and when he saw me, he held up one finger. Wait. I waited, studying the spines. Philosophy, history, poetry in 4 languages. Whatever I'd expected from a man who operated in gray spaces, it wasn't Rilke. Surprised, he'd ended his call and stood watching me with that unreadable expression. People are always more than they seem, I said carefully. And you're learning to see past the surface. He pulled a book from the shelf, slim, leather-bound. My father believed education was the only inheritance that couldn't be stolen. He made sure I understood beauty alongside brutality. Did it work? I'm not sure yet. He handed me the book, Poetry in My Grandmother's Language. For you, there's a bookstore in the quarter that stocks regional literature. Paulo knows it. I opened the cover and found an inscription in my grandmother's dialect. For Chiara, who translates between worlds. How did you? I make it my business to know things, he repeated, echoing our first conversation. But this time it didn't sound like a threat. Your grandmother arrives this afternoon. Dr. Werner will examine her tonight. You should be here. He moved toward the door, then paused. The person asking questions, it's Marco's associate, not Lucia. I'm handling it. How? By making it more expensive to keep asking than to forget the answers. His smile was cold. Go see your grandmother, Chiara. Let me do what I'm good at. My grandmother's arrival was orchestrated like a military operation. Ambulance, medical team, Dr. Werner with his patient smile and careful hands. They settled her in a room that looked like a garden dream, all soft light and fresh flowers. She woke that evening, clearer than she'd been in weeks, and looked around with wide eyes. This is his house, she whispered in our language. One of them. He's protecting you. Or keeping me close so I can't run. She gripped my hand with surprising strength. Sometimes those are the same thing. Your grandfather used to say that the old Marcello had a gift for turning obligations into opportunities. He'd give you something you desperately needed, then wait to see if you'd remember the gift or resent the debt. She studied my face. Which do you feel? Both, I admitted. Good, that means you're paying attention. She closed her eyes, tired but peaceful. The son walks the same path as his father. Just make sure you know which direction you're walking, Tesoro, forward or down. Dr. Werner found me in the hallway after and spoke in accented but careful Italian. Your grandmother has weeks, perhaps a month. The pain management we've started will help, but you should prepare yourself. I've been preparing since the first diagnosis, but hearing it in this beautiful prison made it real. Dante found me in the garden at midnight, sitting on a stone bench under stars I couldn't see through tears. He didn't ask if I was all right. Men like him knew better. Instead, he sat beside me in silence, solid and warm. Dr. Werner's prognosis, he asked eventually. Weeks. He nodded, unsurprised. Then we make them good weeks. Anything she wants, anything that brings comfort, tell Sophia. It's already approved. Why are you doing this? I turned to him, needing to understand. The debt is paid. You have your translator. Why go to this trouble? He looked at me with an expression I couldn't name. Because your grandmother knew my father. Because you remind me that not everything in my world is transactional. Because, he stopped, then finished quietly. Because I want to. He stood and offered his hand. Come inside, it's cold and you haven't eaten. I let him pull me up, and we walked back through his fortress villa while somewhere in Rome, someone was deciding whether asking questions about me was worth whatever price Dante had set. The next morning, I woke to find Sophia at my door with coffee and a garment bag. "Mr. Marcello has a dinner tonight," she said. "Political, you'll attend as his associate. This is appropriate." The dress in the bag was midnight blue, elegant without being formal, cut to suggest competence. With it a card: "You translate more than words. Show them." The dinner was in a palazzo that made Dante's villa look modest, full of politicians and their polished spouses. I recognized 2 senators, a ministry official, and several men whose faces appeared in newspapers beside words like inquiry and allegations. Dante introduced me as his associate without elaboration, and no one pressed. I stood beside him during cocktails, listening to conversations that slipped between Italian and dialect, tracking subtext and implied threats. A councilwoman approached, smiling too broadly. "Marcello, they say you're expanding into infrastructure. Ambitious." "Profitable," Dante corrected, "and cleaner than most investments." She laughed. "Clean is relative in our business." "Your business," he replied smoothly. "Mine is simply commerce." After she left, I murmured the 3 things she'd said in dialect to her husband: concerns about Dante's overreach, questions about his Roman foundation, suggestions that someone should test his flexibility. Dante's expression didn't change, but his hand found the small of my back, a gesture that looked protective and possessive all at once. "She's positioning for something," he said quietly. "She's testing whether you'll react." "Smart girl." He steered me toward the terrace, away from listening ears. "What else did you hear?" I told him about the banker's aside to the ministry official, the senator's murmured concern about Sicilian interests moving north, the constellation of small comments that suggested coordinated worry about Dante's expanding influence. "They're afraid of you," I concluded. "Fear is useful." He handed me a glass of wine I hadn't asked for. "But fear can become action if not properly managed. I'll need you sharper tomorrow. There's a meeting with the very people who are nervous. And if they ask who I am, tell them you're my translator," which is true. He studied me in the dim light. "But we both know you're becoming more than that." The way he said it made my pulse quicken. What am I becoming? "Someone I trust." He touched my cheek, the gesture almost tender. "Don't make me regret it." He walked me back inside, where someone was making a toast to commerce and progress. I stood at Dante's side and translated words that meant one thing in Italian and another in silence, learning to read the space between what people said and what they meant. When we left, it was nearly midnight. In the car, Dante was quiet, scrolling through messages with an expression that suggested someone had crossed a line. "Problem?" I asked, echoing Naples. "Marco's associate is still asking questions. More specifically, he's visiting places you used to work." Dante pocketed the phone. "I don't like when people test boundaries I've made clear." "What will you do?" "Remind him why boundaries exist." He met my eyes. "You won't see how, you don't need to know the specifics, but it stops tomorrow." "And if it doesn't?" "Then I escalate until it does." His voice was flat, final. "I protect what's mine, Chiara, I told you that." At the villa, he walked me to my suite and paused at the door. We'd done this before, this ritual of parting, this tension between professional distance and something else entirely. "Thank you," I said quietly, "for tonight, for all of it." He stepped closer, close enough that I caught the scent of his cologne, cedar and power and choices I was still making. "You're welcome, but understand something." His hand came up to cup my jaw, gentle and possessive. "The more valuable you become to me, the more danger you're in. People will use you to hurt me, and I'll use everything I have to stop them. Even if it means hurting others. Especially then." He leaned in, and for a breathless moment I thought he would kiss me. Instead, he pressed his forehead to mine, close and warm. "Sleep well. Tomorrow we handle politicians, and they're worse than smugglers." Then he was gone, and I was alone with a racing heart and the certainty that I was falling into something I couldn't climb out of. My grandmother, when I visited her before bed, smiled knowingly. "He's courting you," she said in our language. "The Marcello way, with protection and proximity and careful escalation. He's my employer. He's a man who wants you." She took my hand. "And you want him back even though you're terrified of what that means." "I don't. Chiara, I'm dying, not blind." Her grip tightened. His father courted his mother the same way, slowly, deliberately, turning obligation into choice. She loved him until the end, which came too soon for both of them. She paused. "Just remember, these men love fiercely, but they love through control. Make sure you can live with that before you let him kiss you." "He hasn't kissed me." "He will," she smiled, "soon." I lay awake that night, thinking about beautiful chains and doors that locked from only one side. The politician meeting was in a cafe that pretended to be casual but wasn't. Too quiet, too clean. The kind of place where conversations happened that wouldn't survive transcription. 3 ministry officials, a union leader, and a woman Dante introduced as an advisor on sensitive matters. They wanted Dante to support infrastructure legislation. They made it sound collaborative, even philanthropic, but the subtext was pure coercion. "Help us, or we'll find ways to complicate your legitimate businesses." Dante listened without expression, then asked precise questions that revealed he'd already done research they didn't expect. I translated when they slipped into dialect, caught the looks they exchanged when they thought I wasn't paying attention. During a coffee break, the union leader murmured to the advisor, "Marcello's sharper than his father, less predictable." "His father knew when to bend," she replied. "We'll see if the son inherited that wisdom." I related to Dante during our walk back to the car, and he smiled without humor. "They want me to bend. Instead, I'll break their alternative options." He helped me into the back seat with that hand-at-back gesture I'd come to expect. "Sophia's already working on it. By tomorrow, their infrastructure plan looks considerably more expensive without my participation." "Legal complications," I guessed. "The most expensive kind, compliance reviews, permits mysteriously delayed, labor disputes in convenient locations." He settled beside me. "I don't threaten Chiara. I arrange circumstances until my cooperation becomes the obvious solution." "Isn't that the same thing?" "It's cleaner." He pulled out his phone, then hesitated. "Your grandmother, Dr. Werner, wants to adjust her medication. You should be there." The switch from business to care, from ruthless strategist to concerned guardian, gave me whiplash. At the villa, I found Dr. Werner with my grandmother, his expression kind but serious. "The pain is increasing. We can manage it, but the medication will make her sleep more. You should spend time with her while she's alert." I sat beside her bed and held her hand while evening light painted the walls gold. She told me stories about my grandfather, about the old Marcello, about the life she'd built in the north after everything fell apart in the south. "The old man kept his word," she said. "He promised your grandfather's family would be protected, and he made sure I got north safely, made sure I had money to start over." She squeezed my hand. "The son has that same quality. When he promises protection, he means it. But he also has his father's ruthlessness. He'll burn the world to keep you safe, Chiara. Just make sure you can live in the ashes." "I don't know if I can," I whispered. "Then decide soon, because he's already decided about you." That night, Dante found me in the library, surrounded by books I wasn't reading. He poured 2 glasses of wine without asking and sat across from me in a leather chair that probably cost more than most people's cars. "Dr. Werner says weeks," he said quietly, "not months." "I know. Tell me what you need." It wasn't an offer, it was a demand disguised as care. "Time, which you can't give me." "I can give you the best weeks possible." He leaned forward. "Private concerts if she likes music, a priest if she wants one, Any relatives you've lost touch with, I can find them. Why? The question burst out. Why do you care so much about an old woman's comfort? His jaw tightened. Because she knew my father, because she's your anchor and he stopped, then finished quietly. Because you matter to me. The air between us shifted, heavy with things we weren't saying. He stood and crossed to my chair, kneeling so we were eye level. This close, I could see the silver in his dark eyes, the scar along his jaw, the tension in his shoulders that suggested holding back took effort. I'm not good at this, he said roughly. Caring without controlling, protecting without possessing. But I'm trying, Chiara. I need you to see that I'm trying. What are you trying to do? Give you a choice. His hand came up to cup my cheek. Stay because you want to, not because you're trapped. Trust me because I've earned it, not because I've arranged circumstances so you have no alternative. He paused. My father built his empire on calculated obligation. I want to build something different with you. What do we build? I don't know yet. He leaned closer, his breath warm against my lips, but I'd like to find out. Then he kissed me, gentle, testing, giving me room to pull away. I didn't pull away. I leaned in, letting the kiss deepen, tasting wine and cedar and choices I'd already made weeks ago in a service corridor. When we broke apart, his forehead rested against mine, and for once he looked uncertain. I should apologize, he murmured. Why? Because you work for me. Because the power dynamic is complicated. Because. I kissed him again, cutting off his careful ethics. When I pulled back, I whispered, I make my own choices. His smile was the first genuinely warm thing I'd seen from him. Yes, you do. He stood and offered his hand, pulling me up. It's late, you should rest. He walked me to my suite, and at the door he kissed me once more. Slower, deeper, the kind of kiss that promised things we weren't ready to name. Sleep well, he said against my lips. Tomorrow brings complications, but tonight just know you're not alone in this. Then he was gone, and I was alone with the taste of him on my mouth, and the certainty that I'd crossed another line I couldn't uncross. My grandmother, when I checked on her before sleeping, was drowsy but aware enough to smile. You kissed him, she said, not a question. How did you? Because you looked different, scared and certain all at once. She pulled me closer. Listen, Tesoro, the Marcellos, they love with their whole being, but their love comes with shadows, secrets you'll learn to carry, enemies you'll learn to fear, lines you'll have to decide if you can live with crossing. She touched my cheek. I loved your grandfather despite his world, not because of it. Make sure you know the difference. How do I know? You ask yourself, am I staying for him or for what he gives me? If it's only the safety, the comfort, the protection, walk away. But if it's him, flaws and shadows and all, then stay and build something real. I thought about that while I lay in the dark, listening to the villa settle around me. Was I falling for Dante or for the fortress he'd built around me? Did it matter when both came as a package? I didn't have answers, but when I finally slept, I dreamed of cedar and choices and kisses that tasted like commitment. The morning brought consequences. Sophia appeared at my door with coffee and an expression that suggested she knew exactly what had happened between Dante and me the night before. Mr. Marcello has a lunch meeting with the councilwoman, she said neutrally. You'll attend. Dress professionally but memorably. The garment bag held a suit in dove gray, perfectly tailored, designed to command respect. With it, a small box, pearl earrings that caught light like promises. The note read, You translate power, wear it well. The lunch was in a restaurant overlooking the forum, all white linen and ancient stones. The councilwoman, Elena Conti, arrived precisely on time with 2 assistants and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Marcello, she kissed both his cheeks, and your translator, Chiara, was it? Associate, Dante corrected smoothly. Chiara handles more than translation. Elena's gaze sharpened. I see. The meal was a dance, Elena probing for weakness, Dante deflecting with precision. She wanted support for her infrastructure proposal. He wanted assurances about future legislative complications. They spoke in careful Italian, but the real negotiation happened in glances and pauses. Midway through dessert, Alina switched to dialect and told her assistant, "Marcello's playing a longer game than we thought. The girl isn't decoration, she's leverage." I kept eating my tiramisu and caught Dante's fractional nod. After, Alina leaned back with her wine and addressed me directly. "You're very quiet, Chiara." "I'm paid to listen," I replied carefully. "And what do you hear?" "That everyone wants something. The trick is making sure the price is worth it." Alina laughed, genuine this time. "She's sharp, Marcello. Where did you find her?" "She found me," he signaled for the check, "and proved herself more valuable than expected." In the car afterward, he was quiet for 2 blocks. Then, "Alina's dangerous. She thinks she's playing chess while everyone else plays checkers." "And which game are you playing?" "Go," he smiled slightly, "surrounding the board before anyone notices." At the villa, he walked me to my suite and paused at the threshold. The kiss from last night hung between us, unacknowledged but impossible to ignore. "Tonight there's a gallery opening," he said. "Art collectors, minor aristocracy, people with too much money and not enough taste. Come with me, not as my translator, as my guest." It should have been a simple invitation. Instead, it felt like crossing yet another line. "Why?" I asked. "Because I want to show you something beautiful that has nothing to do with business." He touched my cheek, the gesture becoming familiar. "Because I want to stand beside you in a place where we're just 2 people looking at art, not employer and employee navigating gray spaces." "We'll never be just 2 people." "I know," his thumb traced my jawline, "but we can pretend for a few hours." I found myself nodding, already knowing I'd regret it and knowing I'd do it anyway. The dress Sophia provided was midnight blue silk, simple and devastating. The pearl earrings from lunch, a wrap against the October cold. When I looked in the mirror, I saw someone I barely recognized, polished and confident and belonging to a world I'd only served champagne to months ago. Dante met me in the foyer, and something flickered in his eyes when he saw me. "You look," he stopped, then smiled, "remarkable." "You clean up well yourself," I replied, and he laughed. A real laugh, not the careful politeness he used in business. The gallery was in Trastevere, intimate and elegant, filled with paintings that probably cost more than I'd earn in a lifetime. Dante moved through the crowd with ease, greeting collectors by name, discussing provenance and technique like someone who'd studied instead of just accumulated. We stopped before a painting of a woman standing at a window, her face turned toward light beyond the frame. "Caravaggio school," Dante murmured. "Late 16th century. She's choosing whether to step into the light or stay in shadow." "Which would you choose?" I asked. He looked at me instead of the painting. "I spent 30 years in shadow. I'd like to try the light." Something in his voice made my throat tight. Before I could respond, a man's voice interrupted. "Marcello, I didn't expect to see you here." I turned to find Marco Santini, the shipping magnate from Naples, smiling with too many teeth. Beside him, a younger man with cold eyes, the associate who'd been asking questions. Dante's expression didn't change, but I felt him shift subtly, positioning himself between me and them. "Santini, enjoying the exhibition?" "More than I expected." Marco's gaze slid to me. "Your translator has impeccable taste." "My guest," Dante corrected, emphasis subtle but clear. The younger man, I didn't know his name, leaned in. "We should discuss the Naples situation. There have been complications." "Tomorrow," Dante's voice was flat. "Tonight is for art, not business." "Some business can't wait." "This can." The air between them crystallized with tension. Marco laughed and clapped the young man's shoulder. "Domenico, let the man enjoy his evening. We'll talk tomorrow, Marcello. Your office, 10 a.m. They left and I felt Dante's hand find mine, his grip tight. We're leaving, he said quietly. Dante. Now. He guided me toward the exit with careful urgency, nodding to the curator like everything was fine. But in the car, his jaw was set, and he was typing rapidly on his phone. What just happened? I asked. They shouldn't have been here. Alina's behind it, testing my flexibility like you said. He made a call speaking rapid Italian too, clipped for me to follow fully. Then to me, change of plans, we're leaving Rome tonight. Where? North Alpine property secure. He reached across and took my hand. I'm sorry, I wanted tonight to be normal. Normal ended when I signed your contract. His laugh was bitter, fair point. At the villa, Sophia was already packing. My things, my grandmother's medical supplies, Dr. Werner's equipment. My grandmother, drowsy but calm, was loaded into a medical van with gentleness that suggested Dante had made his expectations clear. In the chaos, Dante pulled me aside. Listen carefully. The property we're going to is mine, but few people know about it. We'll be safe there, but you'll be more isolated. If you want out, tell me now. I'll arrange for you and your grandmother to go somewhere else, anywhere you want. But if you stay, you're staying through whatever comes next. What's coming next? A reckoning. His hand cupped my jaw. Marco thought he could pressure me. Elena thought she could manipulate me. They're about to learn why my father built an empire and why I've kept it. Through violence. Through leverage, information, legal complications that look like coincidence. He leaned closer. I don't kill my rivals, Chiara. I make them irrelevant. But it's still ruthless, and you'll see parts of me you might not like. And my grandmother. Safe, comfortable, with the best care available. That doesn't change regardless of what you decide. I looked at him, this man who'd pulled me from a service corridor and built a fortress around me, who kissed me like I was precious and arranged realities like a chess master. I stay, I whispered. His kiss was fierce, grateful. Then we go. The drive north took 4 hours through darkness and rain. Dante made calls in 3 languages, his voice moving from business sharp to something colder. I caught fragments. Freeze the accounts. Notify the ministry. Make it loud. My grandmother slept in the medical van ahead of us, monitored by Dr. Werner. I watched headlights blur past and wondered if I'd made the right choice or the only choice I could live with. The property was a villa built into mountainside, accessible by a single guarded road. Inside was warmth and light, a safe house that didn't feel like hiding. My grandmother was settled in a ground-floor room with mountain views. I was given a suite beside Dante's, the door between them unlocked. At 2 a.m., when the staff had settled and my grandmother was sleeping, I found Dante on a terrace overlooking darkness and stars. What happens now? I asked. He pulled me against him, wrapping his coat around us both. Now I dismantle Marco's shipping routes through regulatory compliance. I make Alina's political allies discover financial irregularities in her campaign funding. I remind everyone why my father succeeded and why I'm more dangerous than he was. Because you're more ruthless. Because I'm more patient. He kissed the top of my head. And because I have something worth protecting now. Your organization. You, he turned me to face him. Everything I've built, everything I've done, it meant something when it was about power and survival, but you make it mean something more. You make me want to build an empire worth inheriting, not just one worth fearing. That's a lot of responsibility. I know. His forehead rested against mine. But you carry it like you were born to it, like you understand that power and care aren't opposites, they're the same force pointed different directions. He kissed me then, deep and slow, and I felt the last of my resistance dissolve. When we broke apart, I was breathless. Come inside, he whispered against my lips. Let me hold you while the world waits. I followed him to his room, our room, really, with the door between them meaningless now. He undressed me with careful hands, kissing each revealed piece of skin like it was sacred. We made love slowly, learning each other in silence broken only by breath and movement. After, he held me while I traced the scar along his jaw. "How did you get this?" I asked. "My father's rivals, they thought a 16-year-old son would be easy leverage." His smile was cold. "They were wrong." "Did you kill them?" "No, I learned from them. That violence is expensive and memory is cheap. That fear is temporary but debt is forever." He caught my hand and kissed my palm. "I use the same principles now. Marco and Alina are learning that opposing me costs more than cooperating. By the time I'm done, they'll beg to make amends. And then I decide if I accept." He pulled me closer. "But tonight, I just want to hold you and pretend the world doesn't exist." I fell asleep in his arms, feeling safe and trapped and chosen all at once. Morning brought news. Sophia appeared at breakfast with updates delivered in careful neutral tones. Marco's primary shipping contracts were under investigation for customs violations. Alina's campaign funding was being audited by 3 separate agencies. The associate, Domenico, had been arrested on unrelated charges that would take weeks to resolve. "Efficient," Dante said, reading reports on his tablet. "Almost elegant." "Did you do all this?" I asked. "I made calls. Other people did the work." He looked up. "The beauty of operating in legitimate space is that everything I did is technically legal. I didn't frame them. I just ensured their existing violations became inconveniently visible." "That's still manipulation." "Yes," he set down the tablet, "but it's manipulation in service of protection. I don't apologize for keeping you safe." My grandmother, when I visited her, was awake and surprisingly alert. Dr. Werner said the mountain air seemed to help, though we both knew it was temporary reprieve. "You slept with him," she said without preamble. I, "I'm dying, Chiara, not a fool," she smiled. "Tell me it was your choice." "It was." "Then I'm glad." She took my hand. "His father loved his mother with everything he was. When she died, part of him died too. The son has that same capacity to love completely, to protect fiercely. But he also has his father's shadows. Those don't disappear because you love him." "I know." "Do you?" She squeezed my hand. "Your grandfather worked for the old Marcello because we needed money. He stayed because the old man treated him with respect, gave him purpose. But the work took pieces of him, pieces he never got back. I saw it happen slowly, watching him carry secrets that weighed him down." She paused. "You're stronger than I was. Just make sure you know what you're willing to carry." "What if I can't carry it?" "Then you leave before it crushes you." Her voice was fierce. "Love doesn't mean sacrificing yourself. It means choosing consciously what you'll bear for someone else." I thought about that while she slept, watching mountains fade into mist. Dante found me at sunset on the terrace, wrapped in blankets against the October cold. He sat beside me without speaking, just solid warmth and presence. "Tell me about your father," I said eventually. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, "He was brilliant and brutal and believed that power was responsibility. He built his organization from nothing, smuggling routes and protection rackets, but he also built hospitals and schools in the South. He'd break someone's legs one day and fund their daughter's education the next." Dante's voice was complicated. "He loved my mother completely. When she died during my birth, he raised me himself, taught me business and philosophy, violence and art. He wanted me to be stronger than he was, smarter, less sentimental." "Were you?" "I'm stronger, smarter maybe, but less sentimental." He looked at me. "No, you proved that." "How?" "Because I should have let you go the moment you became a complication. Should have paid your grandmother's bills and walked away. Instead, I kept you close, brought you into my world, gave you access to my vulnerabilities." His hand found mine. "My father would have called it weakness. I call it choosing what's worth protecting." And if protecting me costs you everything, then it costs me everything. He said it simply, like it was obvious. I've built an empire, Chiara. I can rebuild if I have to, but I can't replace you. The words settled over me like snow, beautiful and cold and permanent. Marco and Alina, I said, changing subjects because his confession was too heavy to hold. What happens to them? They make new arrangements that don't threaten my interests, or they continue fighting and discover I have deeper patience than they have resources. He smiled without humor. I'm giving them a choice. Most people eventually choose survival. And the ones who don't haven't met one yet. We sat in silence while the sun disappeared behind mountains, painting the sky in shades of fire and ash. Eventually, Dante pulled me closer, and I let myself lean into him, feeling the weight of choices I'd made and choices still coming. "What do you want?" he asked quietly. "Long term, when the immediate danger passes." I thought about service corridors and champagne flutes, about my grandmother's stories and my own dreams I'd stopped admitting I had. "I want to finish my degree," I said slowly. "I want to use these languages for something beyond translation. Maybe teach, maybe work with immigrants, maybe. I don't know yet." I looked up at him. "And I want you, but not as someone who arranges my life, as someone who walks beside me while I build my own." "Can I do that?" His voice was uncertain. "Walk beside instead of arranging." "I don't know, can you?" He kissed my forehead. "I'll learn if you'll be patient while I figure it out." "Deal." That night, I helped Dr. Werner adjust my grandmother's medication while Dante worked in his study. Later, I found him surrounded by papers, building strategy from information and leverage. "Show me," I said, and he looked up surprised. "Show you what?" "How you do it, how you turn information into power, how you dismantle rivals without violence." I sat across from him. "If I'm in this world, I want to understand it." His smile was slow and genuine. "You're sure?" "I'm sure." He walked me through it. The web of connections between Marco's shipping company and customs officials. The paper trail linking Alina's campaign to questionable donors. The careful construction of legal complications that looked organic but were precisely designed. "It's beautiful," I admitted, horrified and fascinated. "Like chess played on 6 boards at once." "It's survival." He closed the files. "In my father's generation, power meant fear. In mine, it means leverage. I'd rather make someone dependent than dead. Dependencies can be managed, but bodies create new complications." "Is that morality or pragmatism?" "Both, neither. It's how I sleep at night." He pulled me onto his lap and I went willingly. "I won't pretend to be a good man, Chiara, but I try to be a fair one. I keep my promises, I protect my people, and I choose my battles carefully." "What battle are you choosing now?" "Legitimacy, slowly moving the organization from gray spaces to legal enterprises. It'll take years, maybe decades, but I want to leave something behind that isn't just power. I want to leave infrastructure, legacy." He kissed my temple. "Maybe even a family if you'll have me." My breath caught. "That's we just started." "I know, I'm not proposing. I'm telling you what I'm working towards so you can decide if it's something you want too." His arms tightened around me. "No pressure, no timelines, just honesty about where I see this going." I thought about beautiful chains and doors that locked and choices I'd made in service corridors. "Ask me again," I whispered, "after my grandmother passes, after we've survived whatever comes next, after I know I'm choosing you and not just the safety you provide." "Fair enough." He kissed me, gentle and deep. "But know that whenever you're ready to answer, my answer is already yes." We made love in his study, surrounded by the architecture of his empire, and I felt myself becoming part of the foundation he was building. 2 weeks passed in mountain quiet. My grandmother faded gently, her lucid moments fewer but sweeter. Dr. Werner kept her comfortable, and Dante arranged for a priest she'd known in the south to visit. They spoke in dialect about old times, old sins, old forgiveness. News from Rome suggested Marco had accepted new terms, reduced routes, regulatory oversight, cooperation with Dante's expansion plans. Elena had withdrawn from her infrastructure proposal and announced a leave of absence to address personal matters. "You won," I said to Dante over breakfast. "I arranged better circumstances," he corrected. "Winning implies there was ever real contest." My grandmother died on a Thursday at dawn, holding my hand while morning light painted the mountains gold. She went peacefully, the way Dr. Werner promised she would, her last words a blessing in our language. Dante found me an hour later, still sitting beside her bed, and pulled me into his arms without speaking. He held me while I cried, solid and warm and exactly what I needed. The funeral was small, just the villa staff, Dr. Werner, Paulo, Sophia, and a priest who spoke my grandmother's dialect. Dante stood beside me while they lowered her into mountain earth, his hand in mine, saying nothing because there was nothing to say. After, when everyone had left and I was alone in my suite surrounded by her things, I found a letter in her handwriting. Tesoro, if you're reading this, I'm gone and you're deciding what comes next. Here's what I know. The young Marcello loves you. Not the way we love champagne or comfort, the way we love air. Necessarily. Completely. He'll give you everything he has and ask for everything you are in return. Your grandfather loved me that way. It was beautiful and terrifying and worth it. But only because I chose it consciously, eyes open, understanding what I was trading for what I was gaining. You're stronger than I was, smarter than your grandfather. You'll build something with Marcello that we never could, a partnership, not a rescue. But only if you choose it as an equal, not as someone grateful to be saved. The debt is paid, Tesoro. Everything else is choice. All my love, Nane. I sat with the letter until sunset, reading it again and again, understanding that she'd given me permission and responsibility in equal measure. Dante found me on the terrace at dusk, wrapped in blankets against the cold. He sat beside me and waited, patient in the way I'd learned meant he was giving me space to speak first. My grandmother left me a letter, I said eventually. What did it say? That you love me, that I'm strong enough to choose what happens next, that everything from here is my decision. He nodded slowly. She was a wise woman. She said your father loved your mother the way you love me, necessarily, completely. She was right about that too. He turned to face me fully. I love you, Chiara, not as my employee or my translator or someone I'm protecting. I love you as the person who makes me want to build something worth inheriting, who challenges me to be better than expedient, who sees my shadows and stays anyway. I do see them, I whispered. The manipulation, the control, the way you arrange realities instead of asking, it terrifies me. It should. But I also see the care, the way you cleared my grandmother's debt before I agreed to anything, the way you brought Dr. Werner and moved us to safety and held me while she died, the way you're trying to learn how to walk beside instead of arrange. I took his hand. I see all of it and I'm choosing all of it. His breath caught. What are you saying? I'm saying yes to building something together, yes to partnership on equal terms, yes to staying through whatever complications come next. I squeezed his hand. But I need promises, that you'll let me finish my degree, that you'll support my work, whatever form it takes, that you'll catch yourself when you start arranging instead of asking and actually change. Done, he pulled me into his arms. All of it, I promise. And I need time. Before marriage, before family, before permanent decisions. Time to make sure I'm choosing you and not just the empire you've built around me. However long you need. He kissed me, gentle and fierce. I'm patient when it matters. We sat together while stars emerged and the temperature dropped, making plans for a future that felt possible instead of arranged. What happens now? I asked eventually. Now we go back to Rome. You enroll in classes. I continue the slow work of making the organization legitimate. We learn how to be partners instead of employer and employee. He smiled. And eventually, when you're ready, we build a family in a world that's cleaner than the one my father left me. That's a long game. The only game worth playing. We went inside together, leaving the terrace and the mountains, and the ending of one story for the beginning of another. 6 months later, I stood in a university lecture hall, translating refugee testimonies for an audience of activists and academics. My degree program was halfway complete, funded by work I did for Dante's organization, legitimate translation now, helping facilitate cross-border business deals and immigration services. Dante sat in the back row, watching me present with an expression I'd learned to read as pride. After, he took me to dinner at a quiet restaurant where we could pretend to be normal people instead of what we were. "You were brilliant today," he said over wine neither of us was really drinking. "I had good training," I smiled. "Someone taught me to read subtext and translate between worlds. Someone fell in love with you while you were learning." 3 years later, we married in a small church in Trastevere, surrounded by friends who knew too much and asked too few questions. Paulo drove us, Sophia arranged everything, and Dr. Werner attended to toast the woman who'd challenged Dante Marcello to become someone worth loving. I wore my grandmother's earrings and carried flowers from the mountain villa. Dante wore a suit that cost too much and looked at me like I was the best decision he'd ever made. "Ready?" he asked at the altar. "For what?" "Everything that comes next." I took his hand, feeling the weight of choices I'd made and choices still coming, and answered honestly, "With you, yes." We walked out of the church into Roman sunlight, building a life from leverage and care, power and partnership, shadows and light. It wasn't the safe choice. It wasn't the easy choice. But standing beside Dante Marcello, translating between his world and mine, I knew it was the right choice. Not because he'd arranged it or because I'd been rescued. Because I'd chosen it, because we'd chosen each other. And in the end, that made all the difference.